She called me replaceable in front of 15 couples. Then one woman said what everyone was thinking. At 47, I thought I understood my marriage. Catherine and I had been together for 18 years, raised our daughter Olivia through middle school and into her sophomore year of high school, and built what I believed was a solid life in our quiet neighborhood outside Portland. I had a stable career as a civil engineer, she worked part-time as a dental hygienist, and on paper, everything looked fine. But that September evening at Brian's backyard barbecue would shatter every assumption I'd ever made about the woman I'd spent nearly 2 decades loving. The afternoon had started innocently enough. Brian, our neighbor from 3 houses down, had invited about 15 couples over for what he called an end-of-summer celebration. Nothing extravagant, just burgers, chicken on the grill, coolers filled with beer and wine, and that particular kind of relaxed atmosphere that comes when people who've lived near each other for years finally have an excuse to actually talk. The air was thick with the smell of charcoal and barbecue sauce, and golden September light filtered through the oak trees in Brian's yard, casting everything in that warm glow that makes you forget, just for a moment, that autumn and all its changes are coming. Catherine had always been the extrovert in our relationship. Where I tended toward quiet observation, she thrived in social settings, her laughter carrying across rooms, her ability to move effortlessly from conversation to conversation something I'd always admired, even envied a little. That evening was no different. Within 20 minutes of arriving, she'd already made her rounds, wine glass in hand, touching shoulders, leaning in to hear gossip, her voice rising and falling in that practiced rhythm of someone who knows exactly how to work a crowd. I stayed closer to the grill, nursing a beer, talking shop with a couple of the guys about property taxes and the new traffic light they were installing on Maple Street. Boring stuff maybe, but comfortable, safe. I could see Catherine across the yard, surrounded by 4 or 5 women, all of them holding wine glasses, all of them laughing at something someone had just said. I remember thinking in that moment, how lucky I was, how she brought light to spaces I couldn't, how we balanced each other. Then I heard it. Her voice, louder than the others, cutting through the general murmur of conversation with a clarity that made several people turn their heads. "You know what I think sometimes?" Catherine said, and I could hear the slight slur in her words, the telltale sign that she was on her 3rd or 4th glass. "I think we should just be able to trade husbands. Like mix it up every few years. Keep things interesting." The women around her erupted in laughter. A couple of them nearly choked on their wine. I saw Janet from across the street playfully swat Catherine's arm, and Maria, who lived on the corner, threw her head back with a cackle that seemed to echo off the fence. I stood there, 30 feet away, beer frozen halfway to my lips, and felt something inside me crack. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was something colder, something that started in my chest and spread outward like ice water through my veins. Humiliation. That's what it was. Pure, distilled humiliation, served up in front of neighbors I'd have to see every time I took out the trash or mowed the lawn. But worse than the humiliation was the recognition, because this wasn't the first time Catherine had used me as a punchline. There had been other moments, smaller ones, easier to dismiss. The time she joked at a dinner party that I was boring in bed but at least reliable. The comment at her sister's wedding about how I'd let myself go since we got married. The hundreds of tiny cuts, delivered with a smile, that I'd convinced myself were just her sense of humor, just the way she communicated, nothing personal. Except it was personal. It had always been personal. One of the guys next to me, Tom, had heard it too. He glanced at me with an uncomfortable half-smile, the kind men give each other when they don't know what to say but feel obligated to acknowledge that something awkward just happened. "Women, right?" Tom offered weakly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had gone tight. Across the yard, the laughter was starting to die down. The women were catching their breath, wiping their eyes. Catherine took another sip of wine, looking pleased with herself, basking in the attention her comment had generated. And then Rebecca spoke. Rebecca lived 4 houses down with her husband Marcus. She was in her early 50s, worked as a high school guidance counselor, and had always struck me as someone who saw through surfaces, who understood people in ways most of us don't. She'd been standing at the edge of the circle, wine glass untouched, watching Catherine with an expression I couldn't quite read. When Rebecca finally spoke, Her voice was quiet but clear enough that everyone in the immediate area heard her. "Careful, Catherine," Rebecca said, her eyes steady and unflinching. "Some trades can't be undone. Sometimes you don't realize what you're giving away until it's already gone. And by then, nobody wants it back." The laughter stopped like someone had flipped a switch. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that makes people shift their weight and suddenly find their shoes very interesting. Catherine's smile vanished. The wine glass in her hand trembled slightly, and I watched as her face went through a series of micro-expressions. Confusion first, then comprehension, then something that looked uncomfortably close to fear. Janet tried to restart the conversation with a nervous laugh, something about how they were all just kidding around, but it fell flat. Maria mumbled something about needing to check on her kids. Within 30 seconds, the circle had dissolved, the women drifting away to other conversations, leaving Catherine standing alone with her wine glass and whatever thoughts were racing through her head. I turned back to Tom and the other guys, but the conversation had died there too. Everyone had heard. Everyone had seen. And in that moment, I realized that Rebecca hadn't just called out Catherine. She'd said out loud what probably half the neighborhood had been thinking for years. The rest of the evening passed in a fog. I went through the motions, accepting a burger I didn't want, making small talk I didn't mean, avoiding eye contact with Catherine even though I could feel her looking at me from across the yard multiple times. My mind was elsewhere, replaying Rebecca's words on an endless loop. Sometimes you don't realize what you're giving away until it's already gone. What exactly had I been giving? And for how long had Catherine been taking it for granted? Around 8:30, as the sun finally dropped below the fence line and the mosquitoes started coming out in force, Catherine appeared at my elbow. "Ready to go?" she asked, her voice tight. I nodded without looking at her. We said our goodbyes to Brian, thanked him for hosting, and walked the 3 houses back to our place in complete silence. The neighborhood was quiet except for the distant sound of someone's television and the rhythmic chirping of crickets. Our shoes scuffed against the sidewalk in a rhythm that felt almost accusatory. When we got inside, Catherine kicked off her sandals with more force than necessary, dropped her purse on the couch, and turned to face me. Her arms were already crossed, her jaw set in that defensive posture I'd come to know too well over the years. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't start with me." I stood in the entryway, keys still in my hand, and felt something shift inside me. For 18 years, I'd swallowed these moments. I'd let them pass. I'd convinced myself that keeping the peace was more important than speaking the truth. Not tonight. I wasn't going to say anything, I replied, my voice quieter than I expected. But maybe that's been the problem all along. Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said slowly, setting my keys on the entry table with deliberate care, "that you just told a yard full of our neighbors that you wish you could trade me in for a different model, and you thought that was funny." "It was a joke," she shot back immediately. Everyone was laughing. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." Not everyone was laughing, I reminded her, thinking of Rebecca's steady gaze. "And even if they were, what does that say about us? About how you see me? That you're comfortable making me the punchline in front of people we have to live next to for God knows how many more years?" Catherine's face flushed red, but I couldn't tell if it was anger or shame. "You're being ridiculous. Everyone jokes about their spouse. It's what people do." "No," I said, and I was surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "What people do is respect their partners. What people do is think before they humiliate someone they're supposed to love. What you do is treat me like I'm replaceable, like I'm some piece of furniture you're tired of looking at." For a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe. Recognition. But then her defenses slammed back into place and she looked away, jaw clenched. "You always do this," she muttered. "You take everything so seriously. You make mountains out of molehills. I can't even make a simple joke without you turning it into some big emotional crisis." I should have felt angry. Part of me wanted to be angry, but instead, I just felt exhausted. Bone deep, soul tired, exhausted. "That's the thing, Catherine," I said quietly. "It's never just one joke. It's years of them. Years of little comments, little digs, little moments where I'm supposed to smile and take it because you're just kidding, but jokes have truth in them. And tonight, in front of everyone we know, you told the truth about how you really see me." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time in a long time, she seemed to have nothing to say. I walked past her, heading for the stairs. "I'm going to bed. You should think about whether you actually want to be married to someone you're embarrassed by." I heard her sharp intake of breath behind me, but I didn't turn around. I climbed the stairs, went into our bedroom, and closed the door. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Catherine eventually came to bed around midnight, sliding under the covers without a word, careful not to touch me. I listened to her breathing gradually slow and deepen as she fell asleep, and I wondered how two people could share a bed for 18 years and still be complete strangers to each other. Rebecca's words played through my mind again and again. Sometimes you don't realize what you're giving away until it's already gone. What had I been giving away? My dignity, certainly. My self-respect. The part of me that knew I deserved better than to be someone's joke. And what had Catherine been giving away? My loyalty. My devotion. The years I'd spent building a life around her needs, her schedule, her happiness. The question was, had she already given it all away? Or was there still time to make her understand what she was about to lose? Morning came too quickly. Sunlight crept through the curtains, and I heard Catherine moving around downstairs, the familiar sounds of her making coffee, opening cabinets, the clink of a spoon against ceramic. For a moment, it all felt normal, safe. Like maybe the night before had been a bad dream, but when I finally went downstairs, still in my pajamas, and saw her standing in the kitchen with her coffee mug, the tension was immediately palpable. She glanced at me, looked away, then looked back, something unreadable in her expression. "Morning," she said flatly. I poured myself coffee without responding. The silence stretched between us like a physical thing, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, I sat down at the kitchen table and said the thing I'd been rehearsing in my head since 3 a.m. "I need to know something, Catherine, and I need you to be honest with me, maybe for the first time in a long time." She set her mug down, her posture immediately defensive. "What now?" "When you made that joke last night," I said, keeping my voice even, "did you actually mean it? Even a little bit? Do you actually wish you could trade me for someone else?" The question hung in the air between us. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of truth beneath whatever answer she was about to give me. Her lips pressed together. Her hands gripped her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles went white. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she admitted something I hadn't expected. "I didn't think Rebecca would say that. I didn't think anyone would actually call me out on it." My chest tightened. "So you did mean it?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I mean, I don't actually want to trade you. I don't want someone else. But what?" She looked down at her coffee, and when she spoke again, her voice was small, almost childlike. "But sometimes I feel invisible, like I'm just the wife, just the mom, just the woman who makes dentist appointments and remembers birthdays. And last night, standing there with those women, I wanted to feel interesting again. I wanted them to think I was funny, that I was still fun, that I wasn't just boring Catherine who's been with the same guy forever." I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. "So you threw me under the bus to feel interesting?" "I didn't think about it like that," she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I swear I didn't think." "That's the problem," I said, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded despite the storm raging inside me. "You didn't think about how it would make me feel. You didn't think about what it would look like to everyone there. You didn't think about the fact that I have to face those neighbors every day, knowing they all heard my wife say she wishes she could trade me in." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I know I hurt you. It's not just about being hurt, Catherine." I leaned forward, needing her to hear this, to really understand it. "It's about respect. It's about whether or not you actually value what we have. Because here's what I realized last night, lying awake while you slept. I've been giving you everything. My time, my energy, my loyalty, my love. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing any of it as valuable. You started seeing me as the safe option, the boring option, the one you settled for." "That's not true," she protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I asked. "Think about how you talk about me, Catherine. Think about how you talk to me. When was the last time you made me feel valued? When was the last time you said something that built me up instead of tearing me down?" She had no answer. The silence spoke volumes. I stood up, my coffee forgotten. Rebecca was right. Sometimes you don't realize what you're giving away until it's already gone. And I think you're about to find out exactly what you've been taking for granted all these years. What does that mean? Catherine asked, her voice cracking. Are you leaving me? I don't know, I said honestly. But I know I'm done being your punchline. I'm done accepting scraps of respect from someone who promised to honor me. And I'm done pretending that this, whatever this has become, is a real marriage. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there with tears streaming down her face. And for the first time in 18 years, I didn't turn back to comfort her. I didn't rush to fix it. I didn't swallow my own pain to make hers easier. I let her sit with it. Over the following weeks, something fundamental shifted between us. I stopped trying to smooth things over. I stopped accepting her half-hearted apologies and her attempts to laugh off what had happened. I became present in a different way, clear, boundaried, unwilling to accept anything less than genuine change. Catherine noticed. How could she not? The man who had always bent, who had always accommodated, who had always prioritized peace over principle, was suddenly immovable. And slowly, painfully, I watched her realize what she'd been on the verge of losing. But that's a longer story. What matters is this. That September evening, with Rebecca's words still echoing in the air and Catherine's frozen face burned into my memory, I learned something about human nature that no amount of reading or therapy could have taught me. People will only value what they're afraid to lose. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone who's taking you for granted is to show them exactly what life looks like without you in it.